Yeah.
Mate, sorry, before your staffy was rude, just interrupted me. We were saying that a mutual friend of ours has introduced us to each other, or he gave me your number, and he goes, mate, reach out to this bloke. He's right up your alley. He's got a really good story to tell. And Pelly knows how I'm super into the breathwork scene, or don't know a whole heap about it, but super fascinated by it. He goes, have a chat to him. And so I reached out and sort of pumped to touch base, man. But as a little bit of a get to know you, obviously, I've only known you for 47 seconds now. Give us a bit of a rundown, man. Like, how did you find your way into the breathwork scene? Because Paoli was telling me you got a pretty crazy story about how you sort of found yourself here.
Yeah, it's one of those stories, like, where to begin. But I'd say, like, look, I think really to break straight into the essence of it, let's like just dive in. It's just, I was such an anxious kid. Didn't have heaps of security in my upbringing. Households were a bit toxic. You know, my parents did a good job. They were split up, but we had just a few things that happened throughout my life that just amplified the feelings of insecurity because I didn't have security. So I internalized everything. And you can picture me as a kid. I was sensitive, empathetic, really caring and loving, always thinking of other people. And so I took on everything in my environment, and it just wasn't super stable. And that sort of just, I guess, just was allowed to culminate and progress and build up stronger and stronger throughout my life. And there's plenty of things that I could tell you about. Like, one interesting thing is that I was wetting the bed, not until, you come out of nappies, but I wet the bed all the way through until I was 14. So I was in high school. That just like exemplified so much, or amplified, more feelings of shame and guilt, all these things. So that was one sort of thing that was going on for me, to just show how much stress I was holding in my body. And really this all comes back for me to stress. And a lot of it's just internal, self-imposed stress. And you sort of fast forward throughout life, and there's ups and downs, there's turns arounds, and we can get into heaps more of it. But just to sort of bring this point home before I ramble for the whole hour, a good friend of mine who I'm now working with introduced me to the Wim Hof breathing. And so he'd just gone and done his instructor course, and we went on, do you know Manly?
Yeah,
You've been
pretty
to
well.
North Head?
I know Manly and what is it? The Key. They're the two places in Sydney I know.
On the ferry.
That's it.
Beautiful. Good Melbourne guys come up for a Sydney trip. We'll have to get you up.
100%. Yeah, I do love Manly though. Yeah. Sorry, bro. Keep going though.
So we went to North Head, and we just went down on the rocks under there, and it was just me and him, and he just ran me through. We're sitting up on the rock, and he just ran me through 3 rounds of this breathing technique. I'd never done it before. Now, to change views slightly, I had done yoga teacher training. I've done pranayama. I've been meditating since I was 18, on and off. Like, I was smoking weed and doing chakra meditations and like getting all energetic, and it felt amazing. Didn't know what I was doing at all. Not that we still do. And it got to that point, and I was like doing this breathing, and like, how you do like the round and then you hold your breath. And I was like, ooh. At the bottom of the breath, I just sat in that stillness, and I was like, oh, it's calm here. And then you breathe in, and you bring in all this new energy, all this new air, and then the oxygen comes to your brain again, it floods you, and you feel alive. That just blew my mind. We did 2 more rounds of it, and I just got deeper and deeper into this feeling of safety and security within myself. I felt home, and it was a place that I hadn't really been very familiar with. Didn't feel safe or secure anywhere. And then now I was like, oh, we got it. It's calm, and it's all within. So from that moment, that was probably 5 years ago. That's how I came into it. And from then on, I helped out my mate, that same mate, run like 30 of his workshops, just sort of assisting. I'd been into ice baths before I found the breathwork. That's a whole other story, which is pretty rogue. It's a bit of a cowboy at it. And yeah, I sort of just helped at the workshops and just took my time. I was teaching yoga for a few years. And then just once a week kind of thing, as I was doing my job, I just knew I had this feeling there's there's something in this that I got to keep doing, and I got to keep doing it for myself. And it kept me, like, my fire alive, you know? And this fire was something that I hadn't really, you know, had much of. That fire is confidence. It's in the belly. It's like self-determination and worth. And I didn't have that from anything else until I did these sorts of things. But I do things slowly and, like, carefully, you know? I'm indecisive. So I tiptoed around doing yoga for a few years. And then, well, actually, COVID shut down the gym. This is sort of semantics. But basically, this past year, I quit my job, took my hands off the steering wheel and went, all right, universe, take me. This is a leap of faith. I know I'm not supposed to be working this job. I got depression from it, like in my gut. I would do my practices every morning, get rid of that, show up. I was running a bunch of restaurants. And from that, I just got shown again. It's like the universe, like, banging on the door, being like, this is not for you. And after that, I sort of spent, you know, this last year doing a whole bunch of things, ended up getting married and doing some really good things. And then it came back to the breath work. And I've done 2 instructor trainings. So I'm certified in 2 different types of breath work. And now for the past few months, I've been sharing it with the world, and nothing has felt better to me.
Yeah, man. No, that's a really nice introduction. One of the things that Matt, the bloke who introduced us, for those of you listening and missed that at the start, had mentioned to me was you running a little bit of this training down along the foreshore there in Manly. It's interesting, man, because I think you're definitely not unique when it comes to the story of trying to navigate your way through stress and anxiety as a young guy. It sounds like maybe the way you'd internalize it impact you in a fairly embarrassing way, especially in your teenage years. It's not a cool one to be able to tell your mates about when you're in high school, but it's something that I've certainly had to navigate that scene, and a lot of what you just explained to me, man, like it really resembles some of my journey. I think I think I probably live up the other end of the spectrum to you. Like I look at people like you and I go, okay, well, this is how I need to take some more steps in my life, because I'm quite, all right, there's an idea, all right, let's just have a crack, see how it goes. Some of my closest friends are a little bit more well thought out, a little bit slower to implement their ideas, a little bit more cautious, or a little bit more careful. And as a result, it's probably not a surprise that when you look at the work that a lot of you guys do, it looks a lot cleaner, looks a lot more impressive than the attitude that I took for so long. But that journey through stress and anxiety is something I relate to personally, even from probably around the age of 14 as well. It was mine manifested in I was a middle distance runner and really keen to perform at a high level there. And for me, it I guess maybe a control thing sort of took the steering wheel, and I took it out on food. And I was quite obsessive compulsive, and I was maintaining my weight, but I think I was like borderline anorexia. I was right on the brink, and seeing some counselors and things through that. But at a young age, it's strange, huh? Like you've got no real tools, especially if your family's not sort of locked into that particular scene, which is amazing as my family are. It's not necessarily there's something they're interested in. So my mum was panicking. It's like, all right, he's not eating, he's not gaining weight, all he does is run. We've got to get him some counselling. And it's interesting, man, and something that I'm definitely grateful for now. But as I sort of reflect back on that journey, there's been a number of things, from exercise and meditation, and as you say, the breath work, which has really started to open my eyes to how much capacity there actually is to be able to tap into like an element of peace and an element of calm. But as a young guy, it's something that you don't really know exists. So did you stumble upon a couple of different fields? I'm guessing yes, based on the fact you had your yoga teacher training. Like, was there anything else that sort of opened your eyes to the fact that, all right, there's actually there's a way to channel myself through, or there's a way to get through this challenge that I'm in, but nothing quite registered as effectively as what the breath work did for you?
Yeah, definitely. Like, through high school, I mean, it's not an answer to your question, but we took it out the wrong way. We got a lot of rage, a lot of anger, a lot of fights, a lot of breaking of the law, graffiti, all these things, and a lot of drugs. When I came out of school, it was kind of like the gates opened, and now I was free to explore this world without bounds, which is exactly what school and leaving school does. And it was around that time So I remember I was like 18 or 19 and I started meditating. And look, I don't know exactly what brought me into it, but that was around the same time I think I started sort of really critically thinking about the world, questioning things, how things are, why we're here, what we're doing, what am I, where did I come from, where do I go? I started questioning all these things as soon as those gates opened from the school. And so I dove into a lot of research for a number of years. And the research was around spirituality, religions, and the roots and the origins of religions, and, you know, into the universe and space and metaphysics and geometry, and also into health. And so I think all those things are sort of, it's like this avalanche just came down on me and was like, here is all this new information. Now try and figure out what's useful for you, because as you're saying, it's different for everyone. Everyone's on a different path. We've all been through different things. We're all holding on to different stories from our past. So then our futures look different as well, because we're usually looking through the lens of the past into the future. And so, yeah, I'd just say at that time in my life, I just became aware of that there is a lot of other ways to address problems and things. Although there was a time when I was about 20 or 21 when I became quite depressed once again. And I actually went to the doctor. I remember sitting in the doctor's room. You know, there's no walls. It's like old, like yellowy orange room. And this doctor's sitting there. And I'm like, I just don't have much will to live. I just don't know what's like the point of this, you know. And this was all the same things. This was the second time it's happened to me. The first time was at 14. Once again, at 14, I was done with living. I was like, I didn't hate myself. I just had no like reason to live. I just went numb. I went hopeless and helpless. Just didn't see what was going on, like, well, or why I was here. What was the point? And it was just a very cold existence, very hollow. And now I can look back and see that happened then. And then we went through and rage came out, and then I went back to the same spot again. And I went on antidepressants for 2 months. 2 months. And then something clicked inside me. This voice in my brain's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, and all respect to anybody taking medications or whatever. Everyone's on their own journey in different times. But for me, this was a point where I went, dude, what are you doing? Why are you taking this pill to make you happy? Let's find it within. So I stopped taking the pills because I had this spark within me. This light came on and went, let's live. What can we do is spread love to the people around me. Because I had a feeling that the world was a bit toxic. There wasn't too much good happening in the world. So that was obviously, you know, as life is a bit of a pendulum, went from being naive to seeing everything. And now we come back to the middle ground of being like, let's just accept. And so, yeah, sort of came to terms with that, came to terms with what I could do, what was like my internal locus of control, one would say, instead of externalizing power and belief. I just put belief inside me and said, all right, let's do this. So I became really happy and just started living the way I still live now, just continued on.
Yeah, no, that's nice, man. That's nice. It's funny. It's a really interesting story. I think to me the most interesting people are the people who have had to navigate some tough territory. And I understand, like, the truth is that all of us have had to navigate tough territory at some stage in our journey. But as you say, the way you process that information can either empower you if you take the approach that you took, or it can sort of just make you cynical. And I can say, I don't know if you ever feel like this, but even now I'm 34, nearly 35, and every now and then I'll still catch myself, even though I'm aware of the power of, you know, the ability I have to be able to perceive the information or to perceive my circumstances in a particular way. Every now and then I'll fall into the trap of just becoming a little more cynical and just assuming that I know the outcome of a pursuit or an endeavor that I'm sort of taking part in before I'm even really beginning it. So it's really attractive to me, especially with like an older guy or an older girl who have been through this, and they're somehow softer than what they were when they were 25, not harder and more cynical and more aggressive and more angry, which like especially in guys, for whatever reason, we I guess naturally in a culture which is fairly stripped of like spirituality and or religion in many senses. It's maybe no surprise we haven't been given any tools to try and navigate our way through it and use it to refine us. But it's really cool, man. And one of the guys that I think really exemplifies that lifestyle is who you mentioned earlier, Wim Hof. And I heard him for the first time on Joe Rogan. It must have been maybe around the same time you heard him, back in 2017. And it sort of blew my mind because I was pretty involved in the health and well-being scene, and I was watching what I was eating and I was looking after my body. And but the idea of breathwork, the idea of actually being able to change your state simply through your breathing was something that not only had I not been exposed to, I'd never even really thought about, you know, this thing that is just constantly working in my body, this breath. And he was around that time, he released a couple of YouTube videos, and it's like a guided 10-minute breathing session to show you how to do it. And I tapped into that a couple of times and, man, was mind blown, maybe. I guess mind blown is probably the right description for it. It sort of just, it blew my mind that I could change my state and the way that I felt in such a short amount of time with something that's not external necessarily, something that I can just tap into. Mm-hmm. And I'm really keen to talk to you about this breathwork, man, because as I mentioned to you at the start, I've been fascinated in it probably since then, and still, man, like I live across the road from the beach, and every morning start my day just with that Wim Hof process. And I can't even really put my finger on exactly what I like so much about it, apart from that calmness that comes out of it. And sure, you can break it down and explain that a little more, and I'm sort of really keen to hear you do that. But what is it, do you think, that people are finding so attractive about this breathwork scene? Because I reckon maybe he was the guy who brought it to my attention and to millions of others. But it's definitely not mainstream yet, but it's on the way to becoming a little more mainstream. I've never heard of breathwork till I was sort of 29.
Yeah, I met someone the other night, and I told her I'm a breathwork facilitator, and she just looked at me. She's like, breathwork? What's that?
It's a fair response.
And I was like, I haven't had that before. I was like, okay, what is breathwork? Yeah, look, man, like, it's a funny thing because we've forgotten about it, but the ancients didn't. Like, there's 7 books in the Chinese Tao about breathing. You know, like every ancient culture, look at yoga. So every ancient culture knew the importance of breathing as a means of self-regulation. And I think that's what comes back to why is it, your question of why is it so attractive? I think you nailed it. It's empowering. You've got the tool within you all the time. It's easy and it feels really good. So the whole thing is like, we can break down the science of it and everything, but you just got to try it because it's so, look, the whole thing of like, we don't value things unless we earn them. And the breath is just given to us. It's there all the time. It's the first thing we do when we enter the world, and it's the last thing we do when we leave the world. So we just go, it's done for us. Let's focus on other things. But often it's the simplest things that are the most profound. So, yeah. What was the rest of your question?
Man, I was just fascinated to find out about what you think it is that people are finding so interesting about it. Why is it sort of coming to our the public's attention a lot more? Maybe not this chick who was shocked by your statement of being a breathwork coach, but on the whole, like I think even my mum, she's 63 years old. If I said breathwork to her, I think she would have some sense of what it is I'm talking about, which if you knew my mum is a hilarious statement because it's not, spirituality is not something she's necessarily that interested in. The idea of exercise and well-being, she's sort of like she's open to it, I guess, but like breathwork still sounds fairly woo-woo, but in the sense it's as you say, the ancients didn't forget it, but for whatever reason in our culture until recently it wasn't really discussed or spoken about or understood in any way. So I was curious as to to find out about the kind of people who are coming to you and asking questions and trying to learn this and what is it that they're trying to navigate through like a practice in breath work.
Yeah, beautiful. Look, like, it's fascinating because you get a lot of different people coming through and they're always curious. And as you've just said again, it's like, if I was to go around and tell everyone to go and do a colonic, a lot of people are going to go, oh, no, because that's something strange and it's something you haven't done before. But you've done breathing all your life. So you're just changing it. You're just changing your dial you've already got. So it's something that people are familiar with. And in that way, it's kind of a universal language. And I think that's really important because fundamentally it speaks to them. Once you get through that sort of mental block of going like, I know how to breathe. You know, the ego has an issue with it, wants to stay constant. And the other thing that I think people are really attracted to this practice for, or because of, is the relief from stress. Our modern life, stress has just increased constantly. You know, you look back in like caveman days or the story of Tarzan, you know, he's got stress in his life, but it's a lion chasing him.
Yeah.
And like any other animal in the savannah, the lion chases them across the savannah, and if they get away, hopefully they do, and they get safe, they shake off the stress. Dogs do it all the time. They'll do it when they're happy as well. They shake off the stress to finish the cycle. What we do as humans, because we're so smart, we hold on to it. We don't let go of the stress, so we hold on to it. So then what happens when we go into these breathing states, if we're doing things like Wim Hof or holotropic breathing or rebirthing or any of these sort of really immersive techniques that basically induce like a non-ordinary state of consciousness through what's happening in the brain and the gases in the blood, you get this chance where your, like the prefrontal cortex, your human brain, where all of our conditioning is, our stories, and hence our identity, which is sort of those things together. We think we are all these things we've been. That comes offline. And we go back to just the mammalian brain, which is very feeling-centered, social hierarchies. But we get in tune with our feelings without the judgment and the inner critic and the rational thought around it. We just get to feel things, and that provides this space for feelings to arise and be processed when we give it permission. So these feelings can come out and come through, and that is something that no one can deny feels good. It might be a bit scary at first, maybe there's some processing, but when you have a weight lifted off your shoulders, you're dreaming. It's amazing. So I think that the stress regulation is really something that has, you know, just moved up and up on the scale of, you call it arousal for the nervous system. Like your phone's beeping all the time. We get on the phone as soon as we wake up and we go, oh, you know, the mind starts racing and being like, these things I got to do, and look at that person, look at what they're doing. Oh my God, I'm criticizing myself. All these things, people beeping at us, there's bloody helicopters going over, everything's going on. So there's more stress. So I think that there's just more need for this.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a great answer, man. One of the things I wanted to touch on that you mentioned was just the way that you know, a lot of us navigate stress. In 2015, I went over to it's a long story. I'll cut it short for the sake of the podcast. But I went over to the Himalayas, man. I was there for a month and doing some mountain climbing. I went up a couple of different mountains, and we had a Sherpa with us, Mingma, the whole time. And Mingma had climbed Mount Everest 7 times. And his life was just this climbing. He would take people like me, absolute muppets in the mountaineering scene, who had no idea what they do, didn't know what crampons were, didn't know what the best food was, didn't know, you know, much at all to do with mountain climbing. But dude, when I was there, one of the interesting things was as we were walking, I said, mate, like everyone here seems so relaxed. I said, I don't think I've seen you upset the whole time you've been here. And I go, mate, like back at home, one of the things that I experience quite a lot is just this stress, like not knowing what to do with these feelings and frustrations. And he goes, mate, well, look at the way that you know, a lot of Westerners live their life. They'll go into an office at 9, they'll stay there till 5 or 6. They might have a couple of negative interactions. And what do? They go back to their computer, they go home. A lot of them, you know, sit down, have a meal with their family, go to bed, repeat. He goes, like, whereabouts in that do you get rid of any of the stress that you're feeling? He goes, the reason that I look so relaxed to you is because I do feel stressed. I get frustrated, I get pissed off, I get angry. He goes, but mate, try being angry for long when you're on your feet 7 hours a day, sort of walking 15 Ks through mountains. He's like, your body seems to just blow off a heap of that steam just through physical exercise. And it's interesting that you mentioned just the dog's natural ability to be able to shake it off, because I think just even through eliminating exercise and eliminating that physical movement from our lifestyles, accidentally in a lot of cases, that ability to cope with stress, it just doesn't seem to really be there anymore. It's fascinating, man. And I guess like that breath work, it is a real physical practice, though you're sort of sitting down. It's maybe no surprise that you feel so good at the end of it. But what's interesting to me, dude, is I've heard people speak about, and I don't understand this, so feel free to correct me. I've never tried. I'm very I tried a joint once on my 30th birthday. That's my dabble in the world of drugs. I'm a pretty clean kind of student. Do you know what I mean?
Pure blood.
Yeah, pure blood, bro. Pure blood to an extent. And I remember what was I going to say? I've heard people explain that breathwork, if you do it to an extent, it's almost like a natural release of that dimethyltryptamine or that DMT. And I was doing a breathwork thing, man. And I've been doing it longer than I realized now, because this was before I went to Nepal in 2015. And I remember laying on the floor of my mate's house, and we were doing it together. And I got through like stage 3 or 4 of the breathwork. And then I held my breath, but then I almost, when you're a kid and you make your face go really red, I sort of held it, and I just pushed and made my face go a little bit red. And I feel as though that was part of the course. I don't think I was making it up. And I felt like I just got shot into this different world. I was, oh my gosh, like something happened where it was like a mini trip. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that a common experience in the breathwork scene? Because for me, as a bloke who's never tried DMT or acid or any of this stuff, I go, hang on a second. Like, I feel like I can relate a little bit to what people are talking about, because that sounds like what you've explained to me, through your own little trips. Is that an experience that you've had just through the breath work?
Definitely.
That's
why people, like they say, don't become a bliss junkie. Or Wim Hof says, get high on your own supply.
Yeah.
So you're 100% spot on. And look, man, like, I don't know much about breath work, but I don't think anyone really knows what's going on there properly. So even like the Wim Hof method, there's like in my knowledge, there's a few unknowns, and what's happening there. Wim might say something like you're tapping into the brainstem, and that's releasing something. He reckons that maybe, and this is again unproven, might be able to release stem cells. Stem cells can be released through this breath work. But to come back to what I do know, what's happening there, I'm just drawing something from my own brain. What's happening is what I was saying before, where you're playing with the carbon dioxide and the oxygen levels. And what happens is that prefrontal cortex, that part of the human brain, comes offline because you're not getting as much oxygen to it through doing hyperventilation, which is essentially what this breath work does. You're blowing out a lot of CO2, and you're also bringing in a lot of new energy, but you're getting rid of it because you're breathing out of your mouth. So you're dumping more than you're getting in. And that essentially they found, like Stan Grof is a guy who invented holotropic breath work, which is very similar to the Wim Hof breathing. You just don't stop us. It's all sort of in the same boat over this end of the spectrum of breathing, because you've got functional breathing over here, which we can talk about as well, which is a whole different story. So they found, like Stan Grof was one of these guys who was part of all the CIA LSD trials back in the 70s. Yeah. And he was part of that, and what they sort of noticed was that what's happening when they're having these psychedelic trips, the breath is changing. So then he went off and spent a lot of years with his wife developing this breathing technique that could mimic the psychedelic effects. And I don't know heaps more about it than that, except that what's happening in the brain is you're bringing that, call it also the default mode network. So basically your brain loves efficiency. It loves doing things it already knows how to do. That's why people get stuck in like traumatic PTSD loop cycles or whatever else, or limiting beliefs, all these different things. And the beauty of psychedelics is it opens the whole brain up in all these new pathways. And that's kind of what's happening through the breath work as well. Because you take a moment without that, so you have this moment of clarity and feeling, and then back to that point of what you said, when you're taking that big inhale, you're then flooding your brain again with oxygen. there's pressure in your chest, which then releases up into your head as well. And that is like this burst of life, because your body's like, yes, I got it again. And so it's like euphoria. And that's where my knowledge ends. Whatever happens in that world, that's it's almost so beautiful. I don't really want to know, because I just want to take people there.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Is that something that a lot of your clients, that they actually do experience? Like, I know you say get high on your own supply, and I can see how it gets super addictive. Like, I could see how that little I want to do it again. I'm thinking maybe when we end this recording, I go have another go, just because it was interesting. But I reckon as a way of introduction to the breathwork scene, that'd be a pretty crazy experience for a lot of people that might get them back again. So is that something that people who are working with you are sort of experiencing?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's where what I'm doing and working with Breathless and my good friend and mentor, Johannes Egberts, everything we've just spoken about over here is kind of this like wild world of breathing. This is like the immersive breathwork techniques. On the other end of the spectrum, you've got the scientific world, where it's like treating asthma, stress, anxiety, things like this. This is a Russian guy, Buteyko. He's been doing this for 60 years, again, without going into it. But what we try and do here is get people on this spectrum and bridge this gap between spirit and science. And within that, everything requires balance, right? I believe balance is critical to life. Life is a dance between making it happen and letting it happen, down to, the attraction between masculine and feminine poles. The same as two atoms bouncing around. I think everything's got balance, and that's that pendulum I was mentioning before. These are some fundamental beliefs of mine. And so within a breathing practice, I think it's really important not to be chasing that high too much, because otherwise, what are you trying to get out of it? You're just trying to get high. You're trying to chase something. And you don't really want to approach things like that. It can for a while, because it's fun, but in a sustainable sense, you want to be doing something where you're not really you don't want to aim to go so far, whereas you're having that huge blissed out experience, but you want to do it sustainably over time, because that's when you're going to be sustainably releasing stress and opening up space for your body to process things that it previously hasn't, things that it's storing. And so our breathing sort of programs, what we would be doing is introducing these sorts of things as a peak experience. And then you got a formal breathing practice where, like, every day for a while, you're doing some sort of breathing, whatever it is, some pranayama, some alternate nostril breathing, some box breathing, maybe a little bit of superventilation, but not trying to go really deep into that DMT land as you've experienced. Because eventually that stops working as well. You'll find when you do, like we've all done it, as soon as we start doing Wim Hof breathing, we do it every day. We all do it. And you do it every day for like a few months, and then it kind of stops working. Because for whatever reason, you've used up, you've become desensitized and familiar with it, you've adapted to it. So that's the whole thing about balance. Just bringing it in for these peak experiences where you do it really intentionally, and you sit there and you go, all right, I'm doing this because I want to release. I want to give myself space, time, the right environment, and really drop in and almost treat it as a bit of a sacred ceremony. That's more how I do it. It's a special time you're spending for yourself, a bit of self-love and self-care.
Yeah, beautiful, man. You mentioned the alternate nostril breathing. This is something that I'm fascinated about, because outside of this, I've got a running channel on YouTube, and the most popular video there it's called How to Breathe When You Run. Nose breathing versus mouth breathing. It was sort of inspired because you might know him. I had James Nestor on the podcast like a year and a half ago. He's the author of called Breath. I'm sure you're aware of it, for anyone who doesn't know. And dude, I was so out of my depth talking to him, and it was an enlightening conversation. And one of the things that he was big on is breathing through your nose. And he's explaining the reason for that is obviously from a running sense. He was saying one of the mistakes that people make is they just assume that in order not to get tired, you just need more oxygen. He said, but then your body's got to try and absorb that oxygen. And one of the beauties of breathing through your nose is it helps filter out the any pollutants that might be in the air, but it also warms up the oxygen so that when it hits your lungs, it's at like a right temperature to help be absorbed. And I thought, man, this is such a fascinating scene. And then he started to unpack a little bit how you can develop your ability to breathe through your nose. Because every second comment on this YouTube video that I posted is, oh, dude, like my nostrils are actually quite blocked. I can't do alternate nostril breathing. Mm-hmm. And James Nestor was explaining, he goes, mate, what you'll notice is just like your abdomen that goes untrained, like that nasal tissue can be developed and can be strengthened through practice. Mm-hmm. He says, so what a lot of people do is they'll try and breathe through their nose. They go, oh, okay, I can't do that. Obviously, I just need surgery. He goes, and in some cases they do, but in most cases what they need is just a practice of breathing through their nose to develop that tissue so they actually have more of a capacity to do it. But I was just curious. So for people who are in that category and could benefit from, well, first of all, I'd love to hear your thoughts on nose breathing. But second of all, could benefit from nose breathing. Like, is that something that you agree with, that practice and that development of that nasal tissue? Because I finished that podcast, I thought, man, I've had 2 sinus surgeries when potentially I could have just adjusted my diet, which I did, and that made a massive difference. I was allergic to dairy. and then just doing a little bit of training. But it was something that never sort of been explained to me before, that we had the capacity to open up our nose and develop that. Is that something you're sort of fairly familiar with?
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And I think you've perfectly segued into this other branch of breathwork or breathing, which is this functional side. It's like, how do we achieve optimal health and optimal performance through optimal breathing? Because the breathing is the foundation of our health and of our performance. It's how we get oxygen to the right places. It's how our body finds balance. And when our body's in balance, it's in ease. It's also not in dis-ease. So, yeah, I haven't had much experience personally training people to open up physically open up their nostril airways. But the thing is, you can train yourself to need to breathe less. So he's obviously spot on the money, and nose breathing is it. Like when we're doing the other breathing, when we're going in the nose, out the mouth, that's for half an hour. You want to focus primarily, the biggest thing is on how you're breathing for that other 23 and a half hours a day, including when you're sleeping. So nose breathing is it, the be all and end all. And you want to be breathing less. Most people say, hey, how much should we be breathing? And most people say more, should be taking deep breaths, we should be breathing more. No, we all breathe too much. Perfect breathing is unnoticeable. It's light, it's slow, it's deep in the diaphragm. So with the nose, yeah, it's just it's beautiful. And a lot of this development happens in the very early ages. And I know James would have spoken about this because they did a lot of research into it. And our ancestors' skulls are completely different to ours. Their jaws are nice and wide, and the nasal cavity is wider and bigger, and it allows more air to flow in through the nose, so it gets filtered, all these things. The other cool thing that people can do is just get these nasal dilators. So as they're training themselves up, you put it in there. It looks like you got a little bull ring, like the piercing, and it just goes there and it pushes them out. So if you do this when you breathe, and it feels a lot better.
I do that all the time because, my right nostril. So whenever I do this, I feel like a new man.
Yeah, right. Okay. The other thing, before all of that, just to, a nice little skill that people can use, or a little technique. There's this is all from Patrick McEwen, who is the founder of Oxygen Advantage. Have you heard of him?
Maybe. I'm thinking of a YouTube channel. I actually don't know that it's called Oxygen Advantage. Actually, I think, is he linked in your Instagram profile? Because
Yeah.
I've definitely heard the name.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm not making stuff up. It's not who I thought it was, but I know who you're speaking about.
So James did some work with Patrick. So Patrick's sort of flying the flag for this Buteco method I was talking about from this Russian doctor who's been doing this for years and years. And this is all around this functional breathing. So he has these nasal dilators they sell on their website, and they've got a lot of techniques for asthma sufferers and for congestion and anxiety, all these things. So one of the things they do, which we could do now, if you're having a blocked nose, the worst thing you can do is breathe through your mouth. because then it stops that pathway. So if you've got a blocked nose, you want to keep trying to breathe through your nose. But there's one beautiful thing that happens from breathing through your nose, which is that nitric oxide pulls up in your nasal cavity. And when you breathe in, you breathe that nitric oxide in. Nitric oxide opens your airways and dilutes your blood vessels. It's actually what Viagra is. And Viagra was actually first created and given to people as an experimental medicine or drug for cardiovascular health. And all those people didn't give the pills back because they loved what the results were. So then the pharmaceutical companies go, well, we can make money from this. Let's sell it as the penis enlarger. Oh.
That doesn't sound like pharmaceutical companies.
That's it. So nitric oxide pulls up. So take a breath in with me now, just a normal breath, and then let it out. And at the bottom of the breath, you hold your nose so no breath goes out. And then we've been talking a lot, so just nodding your head, won't be able to hold for too long. This gets a bit of movement happening. And then you breathe in through your nose. So you do that like, say 7 times max, but it should start working after a few. That movement combined with the holding of the breath and the pulling in of nitric oxide, as well as the build-up of carbon dioxide, these things open your whole face and mouth and lungs and the blood vessels in your lungs, and it's a vascular health as well. So all these things happen because you're increasing the carbon dioxide and the nitric oxide.
Interesting, man. And what's with the head movement? What does this sort of? I think it's just, what is that part of the?
I don't know for sure. I think it's just a bit of movement. So it's sort of, if there is mucus in there, it gets a bit of movement, get a bit of blood flow. Yeah, but it's profound. It's amazing. Like my wife gets a lot of sinus congestion, and she loves this. She swears by it. It's a really good way to show people.
Congestion as well. Yeah. Like I don't know if it's like, I used to always just blame allergens, and I'm sure that has something to do with it. But I noticed years ago I had an allergy to milk, which I sort of mentioned briefly. That was a funny story because I was getting ready for a 3rd sinus surgery, and I was constantly on antibiotics. And the doctor that I'd been going to was like, "Yeah, dude, unfortunately, this is just something you're gonna have to do." And I remember sitting there, just going, "This is such a weird experience. Like I've had this twice before. You're saying I'm gonna have to just keep doing it." I was like, "What are you like? I can't believe how much I'm paying you to give me this advice." And my wife's grandma was like, "Tice, just trust me. I reckon you should get off dairy for a month and just see if that makes a difference." And I was like, "I appreciate your help. You're 83 years old. I got a professional doctor." I go, "All right, I'll do it because I don't want to get this operation." Anyway, needless to say, a month off, and I was back. Like I was good. Never had that 3rd sinus surgery, but I don't know if it's got to do with the fact that like I've got quite a thin nose. I don't know what your wife's situation is, but there's definitely a time each year where I start to notice I'm having a little bit of trouble. So I do like a lot of sinus cleansers, and I've got like one of those sinus rinsing things that I do. Probably not enough, but definitely when it starts to get a little bit cloggy, which is really helpful. But another thing that I got, and I stole from James Nestor, with the idea of developing that nasal tissue is I now tape my mouth. I say I do, but I haven't done it for about a month. I need to get back into it, bro. I know from tonight I will. But one of the things that I'd been doing is just taping that up. And I don't know if this was placebo, and I don't really care if it was, but I'd wake up in the morning when that tape was still on, and I just felt like it was a better sleep. I was like, oh, that's how breathing should be.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, before I deviate too much, pardon the pun, is to chat to you a little bit about, what was it? Oh, about the overconsumption of oxygen. Because that's strange. James Nestor speaks about how we overconsume everything. We overconsume food, we overconsume TV and technology. And he goes, but what people don't consider is we also overconsume oxygen. I thought, hang on a second, like, how is it possible that we can have too much oxygen? Is that something you can sort of just break down a little bit for me? Because I'm fascinated by that as being a problem. It's still strange to me.
I think it comes back to that beautiful dance analogy. It's the breath is a dance. And it's between these gases, primarily carbon dioxide and oxygen. And the body's smart, the body's beautiful, so it holds on to oxygen in the blood. Basically 98 to 99% saturation of oxygen in your hemoglobin all the time. And now every time you breathe in and out, at the bottom of the breath, your body is basically, the impetus to breathe is the increase in carbon dioxide. So that's the waste product that comes out of the cell after the oxygen goes in, carbon dioxide comes out. The body feels that carbon dioxide and goes, "Oh, let's breathe again," and and let go of that, and then make sure we get some new air in. So it's really about carbon dioxide. That is the gold, because the more you can build your tolerance to carbon dioxide, the higher threshold you have, so you can hold more of it in your blood. And when it's in the blood, it's offloading more oxygen. So you flip it and you go, when we're hyperventilating, we're breathing out lots of CO2, so the CO2 drops, so the oxygen stays in the blood, doesn't go anywhere. And that's what most people do. When we breathe a lot, we're breathing out CO2. So then we sit there with oxygen just sitting in the blood, and it's not getting anywhere it needs. That's where panic attacks come in. People are hyperventilating. That's where, when you have a panic attack, they give you a brown bag and you breathe it in. You're breathing in your own CO2. So then you get CO2 rises, you get blood back to the brain, come back to rational thought. You go, "Oh, it's all good," right? So that's kind of this dance, and we just don't know that. We're just not taught that, So we think that by breathing more, we get more oxygen. But no, the body's smart. It's got it in there all the time. But we just need to learn how to utilize and get it into the utilized.
Yeah, no, beautiful, man. And how are you doing that for yourself? Obviously, you're coaching it, but how are you? Have you got a daily practice that's the same each day, or is it something that varies? What does your sort of daily routine look like with the breath work?
Yeah, good question. I think variety is the spice of life, but consistency also builds habits, which build character. So I'll go through periods where I'll do like a 30-day reset, and we'll do sort of the oxygen advantage training where we're just learning to breathe really light, slow and deep, basically breathing invisibly, and also doing a bunch of it's basically simulated altitude training where I'll run around holding my nose and holding my breath, and you're running around and then you breathe in and it's like this big rush. All of that is designed around increasing CO2 tolerance. So then you need to breathe less in everyday life. The other parts of the practice would be taping my mouth at night, which is, for anyone at home, that is the number one thing you can do to improve your health, because you'll get deeper sleep and more REM sleep. And how you do anything is how you do everything. How you sleep, if you do breathing practice through the day and you breathe really well during the day and then you go to sleep and you're like, it's going to undo what you did. It's going to undo all that good work. So tape your mouth is the best thing to do. It feels weird at the start. It'll come off for a while. First week, you might get it on once, and then slowly it'll stay on. And they say, after 30 days, you reprogram the habit and you'll keep your mouth shut, but I do it anyway.
That's
I
awesome,
sleep with
man.
an eye mask on, earplugs in, and mouth tape on.
Oh, dude, you're switched off. You're good. Yeah, I'm going to
Switched
do
off
that.
completely.
We live on a road that gets a little busy from time to time, and the mouth tape does nothing to block out that noise. So I reckon I'm going to get some earplugs myself.
Yeah.
Dude, I noticed that. That's definitely what I noticed. I feel like I have a deeper sleep. The only reason I stopped using it is because I lost my tape and I've been lazy.
Yeah.
But I definitely noticed when I wake up, I go, that feels fantastic.
Buy a few packs.
Yeah, bro.
Yeah.
No, I'm 100% going to do it. Actually, one of Powley's mates, Liam Jones. I don't know if you know Liam. He's got a roll of tape next to his bed as well.
Yeah.
Inspired by James Nestor, man. But dude, we've got a few minutes left. I could talk to you all afternoon, but as I said, I'm trying a new program here. They've given me a free hour, so I'm just nervous that if this conversation goes over an hour, they're going to delete the podcast and go, mate, give us all your cash, otherwise we won't give it back. But dude, is it like a simple little practice you could take us out on, even just like a 2-minute? That someone could implement just to get a bit more of a taste for what it is that you do?
For sure, yeah. And I think the practices we first spoke about, this sort of superventilation, these deep immersive practices, I won't do here because we want to make sure people aren't driving or doing something and, all that sort of stuff. We want to do it in a safe environment where you're laying down with some space. So what we'll run through is something that everyone can take home, which is a very, very simple practice. And it's actually probably one of the best practices you can implement. It's simple, and that's why it's beautiful. It's bringing the heart and the brain into coherence. And it's also bringing the breath into a more regular pattern. So what we're going to do, so you're going to close down your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. You're firstly just becoming aware of your body and your posture. You're sitting up nice and tall, the long spine, bit of loose spine. Your chest is proud, your shoulders are soft, your belly is soft. That's it. And you're just meeting me on an exhale, so just letting the breath fall out. And then we'll breathe in for 2, 3, 4, 5. Out. 2, 3, 4, 5. In. 2, 3, 4, 5. Out. Relaxing the body and the shoulders. 4, 5. In. You feel your side ribs expanding as you inhale. Out. 2, 3, 4, 5. In. Feel those ribs expanding. 4, 5. Out. Bringing softness to the shoulders and the body. 4, 5. In. 2, 3, 4, 5. Out. 2, 3. Sinking into the bottom of the breath. In. 2, 3. Filling up. Out. 2, 3, 4, 5. Nice. Normal breath in. Normal breath out. So that's a really nice way just to reset and come back to center. It's super simple. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And it does bring your heart and brain into coherence. Gets you breathing 6 breaths per minute, which is optimal. Yeah.
Awesome, bro.
I think we're right on the dot.
That was awesome, man. Hey, thanks for stopping by, dude. We'll do this again.
Mate, appreciate you. Appreciate you having me on your podcast.